to the tavern with you.
And the magic flows like jewels in the gardens. Let's dive into the realms of DeFi kingdoms.
In the lands where heroes roam, with quests and kingdoms we call home. There's a monk who drinks and spins his yarn, and a caster casting spells at dawn. It's the drunk monk and the spellcaster, guiding you through realms faster. Crystal Vale is Farendale, break down quests and tell the tale. Love but share, have no fear. Kingdom secrets you'll find here. Will shine bright with heroes summoned, ready to fight. The monk's got wisdom in every sip, while the caster's magic never slips. It's the drunk monk and the spellcaster, guiding you through realms faster. Crystal Vale, Sarendale, break down quests and tell the tale. Love but share, have no fear. Kingdom secrets you'll find here. Jewels shine bright with heroes summoned, ready to fight. The monk's got wisdom in every sip, while the caster's magic never slips. You'll find here. Gardens grow, jewels shine bright, with heroes summoned, ready to fight. The monk's got wisdom in every sip, while the caster's magic never slips. It's the drunk monk and the spellcaster, guiding you through realms faster. Crystal Vale is Sarendale, break down quests and tell the tale. Love and share, have no fear. Kingdom secrets you'll find here. You'll find here. So grab your mug and hold on tight. Let the magic guster fly. Kingdoms take flight. To the realms.
Ever feel like you're going into a DFK battle with like one hand tied behind your back? Like you're just clicking buttons and hoping for the best.
It's like trying to win a chess match, you know?
Yeah.
Only knowing how to move the pawn.
Exactly. But what if I told you there's this in-game, like, treasure trove of intel, a secret weapon almost, that can like transform you from button masher to strategic mastermind?
You're talking about the Omnibus.
Bingo.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the flashiest thing in DeFi Kingdoms, I'll grant you that. But when it comes to giving you an edge in battle, nothing else comes close.
It's your cheat sheet to every hero's like strengths and weaknesses, HP, attack power, defense, but also those more obscure stats that most players, I think, barely even notice.
And those obscure stats, as you call them, can be total game changers.
Absolutely. Imagine going up against an opponent who like looks tough on paper, right? But then you peek into the Omnibus and you realize their magical defense is practically non-existent. Knowing that could completely change your entire attack strategy.
Okay, that's a great high-level overview, but for those hearing about the Omnibus for the first time, can you paint a picture of how this all works? Where do we even find this thing, and what are we actually like looking at?
So picture this. You're about to head into battle. Tension's building, and right there, tucked away in the corner of your screen, is this unassuming little hamburger menu.
Easy to miss if you don't know what you're looking for.
Exactly. But click that menu, and boom. The Omnibus unfolds, revealing a breakdown of every hero in the fight, yours and your opponent's.
Like X-ray vision for your enemies, except instead of bones, we're talking stats. So what's the first thing a strategic player should be looking at in the Omnibus?
Let's start with the fundamentals. The things even a brand new player is going to recognize. HP and MP.
Health points and mana points.
Yeah.
Your lifeblood in any RPG, right?
Exactly. HP, your hit points, show how much damage you can take before, well, it's game over. Run out, and it's back to the summoning portal for you.
Not ideal.
Definitely not. And then there's MP, your mana points, which fuel all those cooldown skills and spells.
The stuff that makes your hero more than just a, basic attacker. Run out of MP, you're stuck with those basic attacks, right?
Right. Now, speaking of attacks, you'll see attack and spell listed right alongside those core stats we just talked about.
So attack tells me how much raw physical damage my warrior can dish out with each swing of their sword. And spell is basically the same thing, but for my mage's fireballs.
Precisely. But here's where things get interesting. You'll notice PACC and MACC right below those. Those stand for physical accuracy and magical accuracy.
So even with a crazy high attack stat, there's no guarantee you'll actually hit your target.
Exactly. Let's say your warrior with that killer attack stat is going up against a nimble rogue. If their PACC is low, they might swing and completely miss, rendering that powerful attack useless.
So it's like trying to hit a moving target. The lower your accuracy, the less likely you are to connect.
Exactly. And the same applies to magical attacks.
High spell is great, but if your accuracy is lacking, it's like trying to win a wizard duel with a faulty wand.
The perfect analogy. You're catching on to the strategic nuances of the Omnibus.
I'm learning from the best. But before we move on, there's one thing I'm not quite clear on. What happens if your accuracy is higher than your opponent's evasion? Like, if my warrior has 100% PACC and the rogue they're fighting only has, say, 50% evasion, is that a guaranteed hit every time?
That's a great question, and it highlights a key point about the Omnibus. It's not just about individual stats in isolation. It's about understanding how they, interact. In your example, that warrior's 100% PACC means they have a high chance of landing their attack. But there's still that 50% chance the rogue could get lucky and dodge.
So even with a massive accuracy advantage, it's not a sure thing. There's always an element of chance.
Precisely, which is why understanding these interconnected stats can be so crucial for making strategic decisions.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've covered the basics of attack and spell power, but what about a hero's ability to take a hit? I'm assuming that's where defense stats come into play.
You got it. And just like with attack and spell, the Omnibus breaks down defense into two main categories: PDEF for physical defense and MDEF for magical defense.
So if I'm sending my heavily armored knight up against a ferocious ogre, I want to make sure they have a high PDES score to withstand those brutal club swings, right?
Exactly. PDEF is all about mitigating physical damage. The higher the score, the less damage your hero takes from those types of attacks.
And MDEF is the same concept, but for magical attacks. So my squishy wizard better have a decent MDEF score if they want to survive a barrage of fireball.
They're getting it. But here's where it gets even more interesting. We also have PR3 and MR to consider. These are your damage reduction stats.
Okay, so this sounds like it's building on those base defense stats we just talked about. Is that right?
Absolutely. Think of it like this. Your PDEF and MDF are like your hero's base armor. And then PR Red and MR Red are like additional layers of protection that reduce the damage that gets through.
So if my knight has a high PDEF and a high PR Ed, they're basically an impenetrable wall of steel.
Essentially. Those damage reduction stats are especially powerful against opponents who hit hard with a particular damage type. For example, if you know you're facing a team that relies heavily on physical damage, stacking PRED on your frontline heroes can be a game changer.
It's like giving them extra armor specifically designed to counter the enemy's main weapon. I love it.
It's all about strategy. Now, there are two more defensive stats listed in the Omnibus: BLK for block and SBLK for spell block.
I have a feeling I know where this is going. These stats determine the chance of completely blocking an attack, right?
You're on fire today. BLK represents the chance to block physical attacks, and, as you might have guessed, SBLK is all about deflecting those incoming spells.
So if my hero has a high BLK, they basically become Neo from the Matrix, effortlessly deflecting blows that would send other heroes reeling.
Exactly. And just like in the Matrix, timing and a bit of luck are involved, but having a high block chance can be incredibly powerful, especially against those relentless attackers who rely on overwhelming their opponents with a flurry of blows.
Okay, this is all starting to make so much more sense. But we've only scratched the surface of the Omnibus, haven't we? There's still so much more to uncover. What other strategic gems are hidden within its depths?
There's plenty more. We still need to dive into those less intuitive stats. The ones that can really make or break a battle when you understand how to leverage them.
You're talking about stats like REC, SIR, Speed, EA, right?
Exactly. These stats might not seem as immediately impactful as something like attack or defense. But trust me, understanding how they work can completely transform your approach to combat in DFK.
This is what I'm talking about. This is the deep dive I was hoping for.
I aim to please. Now let's start with REC, which stands for Recovery Chance.
Okay, based on the name, I'm assuming this has something to do with recovering from, well, something.
You got it. Specifically, REC refers to your hero's chance of recovering from a negative status effect. Imagine your hero gets hit with a nasty poison attack that slowly drains their HP each turn.
Definitely not ideal.
Definitely not. But if your hero has a decent REC score, there's a chance they might shake off that poison before it does too much damage.
So it's like having a built-in safety net for those nasty status ailments that can really throw a wrench in your plans.
Exactly. Even a small REC percentage can make a big difference in a drawn-out battle. It's all about increasing your odds of shaking off those debilitating effects and turning the tide back in your favor.
So when I'm analyzing a hero in the Omnibus, a higher RDC score is generally better, right?
Absolutely. It's like having a little bit of extra insurance in case things go south.
Love it. Okay, what about S-Air? That one sounds interesting. Status effect resistance. Is that about resisting those negative effects in the first place?
Exactly. Think of S-Air as your hero's natural immunity to things like stun, silence, or even those pesky charm effects that can turn your allies against you.
Oh man, those are the worst. So if my hero has a high SCR, there's a chance they'll just shrug off those effects like they're nothing.
Precisely. Let's say your opponent tries to land a crucial stun on your healer, hoping to take them out of the fight temporarily. If that healer has a high SCR score, there's a good chance that stun will have absolutely no effect.
That's huge. Talk about disrupting your opponent's strategy. So if I'm facing a team that's known for using a lot of status effects, I want to make sure my heroes have a healthy amount of SIR.
You're getting it?
I'm feeling like a strategic mastermind already. Okay, so we've covered recovery and resistance, but what about a hero's speed?
Speed is where things get really interesting because it influences so much more than just who gets to attack first.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Think of it this way. In a basketball game, the fastest player isn't always the one who scores the most points. Sometimes it's about controlling the pace of the game, making that crucial pass or getting into position for the rebound.
So speed in DFK is about more than just attacking first. It's about dictating the flow of the entire battle.
Precisely. A hero with high speed can choose to strike first, but they can also hang back, let the enemy make their move, and then counter with a devastating attack when the opportunity arises.
It's almost like having an extra turn, strategically speaking.
Exactly. They might delay their attack to heal an ally at just the right moment, or maybe they need to get a crucial buff off before the enemy can react.
So it adds this whole other layer of strategy to the game.
Precisely. And finally, we have EVA, short for evasion.
Okay, I'm going to take a stab at this one. EVA is all about dodging attacks, right? Like how slippery a hero is on the battlefield.
You hit the nail on the head. Remember how we talked about PACC and MACC determining how likely your attacks are to land? Well, EVA is your opponent's best defense against both those physical and magical attacks.
So if my nimble rogue has a high EVA score, they'll be dancing around the battlefield, dodging blows like a shadow.
Exactly. They become incredibly difficult to hit, which can be incredibly frustrating for opponents who rely on landing those big, powerful attacks.
Especially those the opponents have low accuracy to begin with. It all ties together.
You're catching on quickly. You're well on your way to becoming an Omnibus master.
You know, it's funny. Before this deep dive, I looked at the Omnibus mostly to check if my hero had enough HP to survive a tough fight. But now I'm realizing it's so much more than just a stat sheet. It's like this whole secret language of strategy that I'm just starting to understand.
It's true. The Omnibus is like a treasure map. And those less obvious stats we've been discussing, they're the clues that lead you to the buried treasure-winning strategies you might have otherwise missed.
And speaking of game-changing clues, we haven't even touched on modifiers and dynamic scores yet. Those sound like they could really shake things up on the battlefield.
Absolutely. Modifiers are like those unexpected gusts of wind that can either, propel your heroes forward or knock them off balance.
Okay, I'm officially intrigued. Give me the rundown. What kind of curveballs can modifiers throw into a DFK battle?
Well, imagine this. Your warrior is locked in a duel with a fearsome opponent, right? They're evenly matched, blow for blow. But then your warrior activates a skill that temporarily increases their PDM, their physical damage modifier.
So even though their base attack stat hasn't changed, their attacks suddenly hit like a runaway chariot.
Exactly. Those modifiers can swing the balance of power in an instant. And the same goes for MDM magical damage modifier. Imagine your mage casts a spell that amplifies their own magical power. Suddenly, those firebolts are hissing like a dragon's breath.
That's incredible. So those modifiers can either be a hero's secret weapon or their Achilles heel, depending on which end of them you're on.
Precisely. And they can come from all sorts of places. Skills, equipment, even temporary buffs or debuffs applied during the fight. So while you're analyzing your opponent's omnibus, looking for those weaknesses, remember that the tables can turn quickly if they've got some surprise modifiers up their sleeve.
This is what I'm talking about. This strategic cat and mouse game is what makes DFK so captivating. Okay, so we've got damage modifiers, but I'm guessing there's a whole lot more to this story.
Oh, absolutely. Remember how we talked about REC and the importance of recovering from negative status effects?
Of course.
Well, there's a modifier for that too, RET, which stands for Retaliate Chance Percent. It's like a built-in counterattack system, triggered when your hero is affected by a negative status effect.
So even if I get hit with something nasty, there's a chance I can turn the tables and retaliate.
Exactly. It's a brilliant way to add an element of surprise and turn a defensive situation into an offensive one.
I'm starting to think the creators of this game were strategic masterminds themselves.
I'd have to agree. And speaking of strategic counterplay, we also have RIP, Riposte Percent.
Okay, riposte. That sounds like a fencing term. Does it have something to do with counterattacking as well?
You're sharp. You're right. RIP focuses specifically on counterattacking after taking physical damage. Let's say your opponent thinks they've got you on the ropes, but you've got a high RIP. Each attack they land chips away at their own health, turning the tables in a way they never saw coming.
It's like that classic boxing strategy of letting your opponent tire themselves out by punching your rock-solid abs. Except in this case, those abs are a high RIP score.
A fantastic analogy. Now let's talk about another modifier that can completely shift the momentum. PRC, or Pierce Percent. Imagine your opponent has built this incredible tank of a hero. High defense, damage reduction, the works.
Sounds like a nightmare to go up against.
It could be, unless you've got PRC on your side. This modifier allows your attacks to bypass a portion of the enemy's defense, punching through their armor like it's nothing.
Okay, now that's what I call a game changer.
It's a valuable tool for dealing with those heavily fortified opponents who seem impossible to break through.
So PRC is like the strategic equivalent of bringing a battering ram to a sword fight.
You could say that. And lastly, we have one more modifier to unravel. LSP, Lifesteal Percent.
Lifesteal. Okay, now we're getting into vampire territory.
It does have that kind of vibe, doesn't it? Essentially, LSP allows your hero to siphon a portion of the damage they deal back as healing for themselves.
So the more damage they deal, the more they heal themselves. Talk about a win-win situation.
It's a powerful mechanic, especially for heroes who are designed to be in the thick of the action, constantly dishing out and taking damage.
So just to reiterate, because I'm realizing these modifiers add a whole other level of complexity to analyzing heroes in the Omnibus.
Absolutely. You have to consider not just their base stats, but also the potential impact of modifiers.
Okay, that brings us to our final piece of the Omnibus puzzle. Dynamic stat scores. Now, you mentioned these can be a little confusing, so break it down for me. What's the deal with these scores?
You know how in school you might get your test scores back, and they'd tell you not just your grade, but also your percentile, how you ranked compared to everyone else who took the test?
Sure. I think I even blocked out a few of those memories.
Well, dynamic stat scores in the Omnibus are kind of similar. Instead of just seeing raw numbers for your hero stats, you'll also see these percentile scores that tell you how they stack up against other heroes at their same level.
So if my warrior has a BLK score in the 90th percentile, that means they're better at blocking attacks than 90% of other warriors at their level.
You got it. And this applies to all the other stats too. Attack, spell, defense, even those less intuitive ones we discussed, like REC and SCR. Those dynamic scores give you a much more accurate picture of how your hero truly measures up against the competition.
So it's not just about looking at a hero's individual stats in isolation. It's about understanding their strengths and weaknesses relative to others in their class.
Precisely. Two heroes might have the same attack stat, but their dynamic scores could reveal that one is significantly stronger than the other when compared to their peers.
This is eye-opening. It's like I've been playing DFK in black and white, and now I'm suddenly seeing the game in full color.
And like any good strategy game, the more you understand the nuances, the more strategic options you have at your disposal.
So before we wrap up this deep dive, any final words of wisdom for our listeners who want to master the omnibus and, dominate the arena?
Don't underestimate those first few minutes before a battle. Take your time, study your opponent's omnibus, identify their strengths and weaknesses, and most importantly, look for those less obvious stats and modifiers that could give you an edge.
It's like scouting out the opposing team before a big game. Preparation is key.
Absolutely. The omnibus is a powerful tool, but it's up to you to wield that knowledge effectively.
Wise words. Well, there you have it, listeners. The omnibus demystified. We've journeyed through the depths of hero stats, untangled the mysteries of modifiers, and even cracked the code of dynamic scores. Armed with this newfound knowledge, you're well on your way to becoming strategic masterminds of the DFK arena.
Remember, the omnibus isn't just a stat sheet, it's a window into a world of strategic possibilities. Use it wisely, and may your battles be ever in your favor.
Until next time, happy gaming.